Before the sun even rose, the screams had already started echoing off the rotting wooden walls of the slave barn. The overseer's whip sang through the air, crashing down again and again onto old Josiah's back, his body collapsing into the mud like a broken sack of bones. He was accused of stealing a handful of corn, just enough to dull the ache in his belly, and now he was being beaten to death for it. The other slaves stood motionless in the shadows, their eyes fixed on the ground, their breath caught in their chests. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look. In this place, even a glance could cost a life. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and fear, a suffocating silence that wrapped around them like a second set of chains. And as Josiah's groans turned into stillness, something invisible shifted in the barn, though no one yet knew what it was. That night, the barn didn't sleep. The bodies within it lay still, but the silence had changed. It was no longer made of fear, but of waiting. In the far corner, barely visible in the moonlight slicing through the cracks in the wood, Jebediah sat upright, his wrists still bound in rusted iron cuffs. He had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't speak unless spoken to, the one whose eyes seemed to hold back storms. But tonight, something inside him had snapped. Slowly, he stood. The iron dragged against the dirt floor as he took one step forward. All eyes turned toward him. "It ends tonight," he said, voice low but unshaking. "Either we die on our knees, or we die running." The words echoed. They weren't loud, but they pierced like thunder. For the first time in years, something stirred in the hearts of the others. Not defiance, but the memory of what it felt like to hope. The whisper of rebellion spread like wildfire. One by one, they inched closer to Jebediah, forming a loose circle around him in the dimness of the barn. No one spoke above a whisper. Words weren't needed to understand the weight of this moment. They had all tasted brutality, but tonight they tasted possibility. Jebediah looked into each pair of eyes, young and old, scarred and tired, and saw something he hadn't seen in years: readiness. "We don't run blind," he said, voice steady. "This isn't chaos. This is strategy." He knelt in the dirt, tracing lines into the earth with a splintered stick. "We watch, we learn, and when the moment comes, we strike together." Around him, heads nodded. Even the youngest among them, barely 10, clenched his fists. In a place built to crush will, a plan had begun to form. Not Jebediah assigned roles with the precision of a commander planning a siege. "We need watchers," he said, pointing to two nimble boys, Elijah and Samuel, who had spent more time dodging blows than lifting tools. "You'll track the overseer's movements, day and night." Ruth, a kitchen servant with silent feet and sharper instincts, was tasked with learning which nights the masters drank themselves senseless. "Find their weakness," Jebediah whispered. "Not just in the walls, but in the habits, their patterns, their blind spots." Hannah and two other women would secure hiding places for the children, beneath hay, under feed sacks, wherever silence could protect innocence. And the strongest among them, they would dig, each night loosening the boards beneath the barn floor. Not one person hesitated. They were no longer just slaves. They were now pieces in a living plan, breathing with purpose. Each night, under the veil of darkness and exhaustion, the chosen few returned one by one to Jebediah's corner, delivering their findings in hushed tones. Elijah reported which guards leaned against the fence post too long, when their eyes drooped and their hands slacked. Samuel had learned the feeding times of the dogs, when they were alert, when they grew lazy. Ruth whispered which bottles were emptied quickest, and which nights the master's laughter echoed drunk and unguarded. Every detail was a weapon. Hannah revealed where loose floorboards creaked least, where a child's breath might go unnoticed. Jebediah listened without blinking, committing every word to memory. In the filth of the barn, amidst the stink of sweat and blood, they built a map of weakness, not of their own, but of the men who claimed to own them. Days bled into nights, and nights into a rhythm of silent plotting. Jebediah kept track of everything: guard rotations, dog temperaments, where the moonlight hit the weakest part of the fence. He had once been a blacksmith before being chained, and now, with no fire or forge, he reforged hope with information. The others followed him without question. They were no longer counting sunrises, they were measuring opportunity. When the barn doors slammed shut at dusk, the day's labor did not end. Beneath the sleeping breaths and aching muscles, minds sharpened. Even children learned to stay quiet, to listen, to wait. No one needed to be reminded what failure would mean. But with each secret gathered and every board loosened underfoot, the distance between chains and freedom grew smaller. They were not just preparing to run, they were preparing to win. On the darkest night of the month, when the moon vanished behind heavy clouds, Jebediah called them together for the final time. No voices trembled, no hands shook. He stood tall in the center of the barn, eyes burning like coals in the shadows. "Tomorrow night," he said, "we move." His voice, though calm, cut through the silence like a blade. He pointed to each person, reminding them of their roles. Ruth would draw the guards into the main house with the promise of stolen liquor and soft words. Hannah would wrap the children in burlap sacks and tuck them beneath the feed cart. Isaiah would distract the dogs with a pouch of salted meat. The strongest would lift the floorboards and clear the way. "This isn't just escape," Jebediah told them. "This is reclamation of our names, our breath, our right to walk free." And no one, absolutely no one, looked away. The night arrived, cloaked in silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In the big house, laughter spilled through cracked windows, drunken, careless. Ruth, wrapped in a faded shawl, moved like smoke through the crowd of tipsy overseers, pouring stolen whiskey with a practiced smile. Outside, Isaiah crept toward the kennels, scattering salted meat into the grass. The dogs whimpered, tails wagging, too distracted to bark. Inside the barn, Hannah hushed the children, sliding them into hidden sacks beneath the cart, kissing each forehead like it might be the last. Jebediah, meanwhile, was already beneath the floorboards, prying up the last wooden slat. His breath was steady, his eyes focused. Every soul played their part with a quiet fury, not of rage, but of resolve. What they were doing was dangerous, but what they had endured had already been worse. When the last board gave way, freedom opened like a wound, raw, uncertain, but real. One by one, they slipped beneath the barn and into the darkness, their feet silent on the damp earth. The children went first, followed by the women, then the men. Jebediah moved among them like a ghost, guiding, calming, reminding. But then a shout tore through the air. One of the guards, stumbling back from the big house to relieve himself, had seen movement. Isaiah didn't hesitate. He stepped into the open, arms raised, drawing the man's attention. A flash of gunpowder lit the night, and then Isaiah was gone. The others didn't stop. Jebediah didn't allow it. "Keep going," he hissed. "He gave us time, don't waste it." Grief would come later. For now, their feet had to keep moving. Every step forward was one more chain shattered in the dirt behind them. By dawn, the trees swallowed them whole. Hidden beneath thick canopies and morning mist, the survivors collapsed among roots and fallen leaves, breathless but alive. Jebediah knelt with Hannah's baby in his arms, the child still sleeping, unaware of the blood and sacrifice that had purchased his tomorrow. Behind them, the plantation sat still, its silence no longer peaceful, but hollow. Chains lay abandoned, swinging slightly in the wind. The master would awaken to empty fields and unanswered calls. He would scream into the void, but no one would return. Jebediah looked to the horizon as sunlight broke through the branches. "We're not done," he whispered, "but we're no longer theirs." In that golden morning light, surrounded by freedom and ghosts, they didn't sing or shout. They simply breathed, deep, full, and for the first time on their own terms.